Podcast is the greatest thing ever. You can literally listen whenever you want on the podcast. I mean, it really is one of the coolest things ever. It's like a DVR on the radio. I use that term a lot. I have to admit, I stole that from the great Lawton Swan, the czar of Clemson sports. Yeah, got that from him. All right. But we will look at today we'll look at the ACC Atlantic Division and the way that's going to shape up according to the master numbers maker there, Bill Connolly from ESPN. Also, I've got reports that Kansas is leaving the Big 12. Now, let's step back for just a second. And I want to make sure that we put this out there. I'll get into it in a moment, but stop and think for a second as you're driving down the road. What the hell does Kansas bring to a conference? Remember, everyone's talking about football's the only thing right now. What does Kansas bring to a conference? So we'll talk about that momentarily. I have to start out with something, though, that's a little bit depressing. Oh, I've got a story on the NCAA, too. By the way, they were probably listening to the show yesterday because something that I said they should do, they're going to start doing. Imagine that. We'll tell you about that momentarily. Got to start out with the show with something that's a little bit depressing, though. I'm a big guy on professional wrestling, and my big thing is I've always loved it. I woke up this morning and see my Twitter feed losing its mind about beautiful Bobby Eaton has passed away. I just want to take a moment to talk about Bobby Eaton for a moment. Bobby Eaton was a guy that he wasn't a guy that could talk to you. You know, a lot of professional wrestling, if you go back and look at it, it's, hey, this guy could talk me into a building. Bobby Eaton didn't do that. Bobby Eaton was just an absolutely great ring guy. You got in the ring with him and everything looked just so easy. And, when I was a kid, I hated the Midnight Express, which, of course, he was a big part of. It was him and Stan Lane and Dennis Condrey for the longest period of time. But Bobby Eaton, one of the greatest tag team wrestlers ever, passed away at the age of 62 this morning. I just wanted to bring that to folks' attention. I'm sure you've seen that by the time it gets here. But being the huge wrestling fan that I am, if I didn't mention it, I would feel absolutely terrible. Of course, the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette, who was the guy that would actually talk you into the stands, and Bobby Eaton would do all the work there for you. There are so many great stories about beautiful Bobby Eaton and how great of a person and human being that he was. Nobody ever says anything bad about Bobby Eaton. I'm working on getting Mike Mooneyham on from the Post and Courier, who I'm sure will be writing a beautiful piece about Bobby Eaton. But sometimes on this great planet of ours, life keeps going, the world keeps spinning. But just from my perspective, professional wrestling has lost one of its greats today. And a guy that was just a great guy, too. From everything you've read about him, everything that he did, Bobby Eaton was just absolutely awesome. So everybody from Ric Flair to Arn Anderson to insert here, your name here, was sending condolences out today. Samoa Joe, you nickname, you know the names. They're just tough. So if you want to talk about Bobby Eaton today, I'll take those calls too at 803-978-1832. Now, I want to talk about Kansas going to the Big 12 really quick here. Mike Vernon was on 610 AM in Kansas to discuss conference realignment. Vernon shared that from what he's hearing, Kansas moving to the Big 10 is starting to look more likely as things go on. Once again, remember, we were at ACC kickoff a couple weeks ago, and what were we told by the president of the ACC, or the commissioner of the ACC? Football is everything. The SEC leads their conference under the mentality that football is everything. Kansas is a school that their football tradition is not very good. So when you hear things like this, and I don't know if it's going to happen or not, I'm just telling you what the report says. Kansas may move to the Big Ten. Now, the Big Ten is interesting to me because I don't think Kevin Warren is a very good commissioner. But on the other hand, when you really sit down and look at it, you have to think about, what does Kansas bring this conference? I mean, any conference. I'm not being disrespectful to Coastal Carolina. I'm a gentleman of the Palmetto State, and I appreciate what teams do in the Palmetto State. Not going to lie, I was rooting for Coastal last year simply because they were going out and they were just popping people in the mouth. So there's that. But they went up to Kansas. I think they've been to Kansas 2 straight seasons, and they beat Kansas. Kansas is not worthy of being a football program that should be in any conference. I mean, I truly believe that. But we're going to have these people that are going to say, well, the Kansas basketball team. Look, Kansas also has issues on this front. They're in trouble for alleged NCAA violations. And the big thing with that is, this is on the basketball side, by the way. Their coach, of course, is like, it's not a big deal. But they locked up their coach. My favorite Kansas story ever. They locked up their coach for a lifetime contract without having an AD. So whoever got together and said, "Hey, let's give their quarterback. Not the quarterback. See where my mind's at. Let's give the Kansas basketball coach a lifetime contract, and we're not even going to have an athletic director here." If that doesn't tell you what people think of Kansas football, I got nothing for you. Got nothing for you. I mean, the athletic director that they end up with is basically a pawn for the basketball program. Everything revolves around what the basketball program is going to do. And you know what? Those days are over. If you don't believe me, just look at the TV numbers. People watch basketball, but not at the rate that they watch football. Not at the rate that they watch football. Now, I'm not saying that Kansas is a sea of no hope, but I guess I'm saying Kansas is a sea of no hope. Because I'm looking around the conferences, and I'm wondering, in the Power 5, what team would Kansas put up a good fight against? I'm being as real as I possibly can. I think Syracuse is probably the worst team in the ACC. I think Syracuse beats them senseless. In the SEC, I think Vanderbilt, it might be a close game. Maybe. If you go to the Pac-12, I don't think there's a team in the Pac-12 that would have any issues playing Kansas. You know, the whole thing we talk about, if there's 64 Power 5 teams, 65 if you add Notre Dame into the mix. If Notre Dame wants to join a conference and we can have 4 16-team conferences or whatever it is, the team that needs to be booted out would have to be Kansas. I'm just saying. That's the one team that theoretically would possibly be in the mix to go away. According to this report, Kansas has been linked to the Big Ten since Texas and Oklahoma reached out to the SEC. And by the way, we haven't really talked about that. How is it that Texas and Oklahoma can get in contact with the SEC and the Big 12 doesn't know about it. If I'm if I'm in the 8 schools that are left in the Big 12, I am firing Commissioner Bowlesby yesterday. How the hell didn't you hear about this from before? You're supposed to be running our conference and keeping us valid, and you're letting our 2 big money programs leave, and they were doing it without you knowing about it? How does that happen? Those are things that we don't, we've kind of heard about, but not really. You would think that something somewhere, someone would have said something. Behind the scenes, something. I don't think Commissioner Sankey met with the Texas AD and the Oklahoma folks in a bunker somewhere in Alabama or wherever. So if Texas and Oklahoma end up going to the SEC, which is going to happen, and the Big 12 folds, it falls on the man up top in Bowlesby. Now, he's out there scrambling around right now, trying to get people to join his idea of, hey, maybe we can get with the Pac-12 and maybe we can put a Band-Aid on this. You, sir, are the problem. You, sir, are exactly the problem. And for folks that sit around and think, man, how could we end up with Texas and Oklahoma in the conference for the SEC? It's because the commissioner for the Big 12 was basically sitting on his butt and not doing what he was supposed to do. And that's something we haven't talked about on the show, but we can entertain that if you want at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Someone had to know something. Someone had to say something. No one can keep their mouth shut. Think about it. People can't shut up for anything nowadays. It's just not going to happen. So I blame, if the Big 12 goes away, it's going to be because management in the Big 12 didn't pay attention. All right, we'll take your calls on that at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Some comments from the online folks. Husker Football says, I'm surprised Big Ten hasn't gone down with Kevin Warren yet. Nebraska, Michigan, Ohio State all want to leave, it seems, and Penn State has had rumors too. Chris says he'd rather watch water polo than Kansas football. There is, above my head right now, the Chinese are playing ping pong. I'm watching women's team ping pong. I'd rather watch that than Kansas football. More of the rundown when we come back. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with the Big 12 commissioner. How do you let that happen? I mean, come on, man. What a gong show. I need a gong show sound effect. I'm going to get a gong. I wonder if I've got a gong. Let me see if I've got a gong in my effects. I should have a gong. I do have a gong. Use of a multimeter is required. All Medical offers a great work environment with many longtime employees. If you or someone you know is interested, please contact Chad today at 803-779-2011. What if this issue Gong, sir. Gong. Like gong show? Where is your head at, Colby? Jimmy with the... Oh, goodness. That's funny. Maybe that's what we'll talk about. What would you rather watch over Kansas football? I'd watch Kansas football before I'd watch the women's national team play soccer. That's a fact. I ain't watching them. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world in the iHeartRadio app. We're also taking calls this afternoon on what you'd rather watch before you watch Kansas football. Some of the stuff that is coming up from the folks online is outstanding. I've already said I would go with the women's team ping pong in the Olympics. I'd rather watch that than Kansas football. Just saying. We'll take your calls on that as well. Also, the Hall of Fame game is tonight. I've got that in my notes too. Steelers and Cowboys. Expect your starters to see maybe one series, maybe two at the most. They are not going to put anybody out there that's going to get injured. I'll tell you that. What's really funny is if you're a gambling degenerate, and I know that we have those that listen to the show because they text me, or they respond to me on Twitter, by the way, with lines and things like that. If you are a gambling degenerate, are you betting on the Hall of Fame game? Because I'm sure somewhere someone is taking some bets on that. But anyway, we'll take calls on that as well at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to call. I'm looking up the there has to be a line on the NFL tonight. I wonder. Let's see your Vegas odds. Oh, look at that. Dallas and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh opened up as a 1-point favorite. It's now up to 2. The over and under is at 34. Jimmy says he's going to take the over. The over. So there's that. People are actually bet on these games. The game. A guy that will probably be looking to get his real estate license in a couple of weeks. No shame in that. I'm just saying he won't be playing football. So there's that. 803-978-1832. Blind Squirrel says, the only gambling problem I have is I lose when I do it. That's a very fair statement, sir. Absolutely fair statement there. I'm not saying you should gamble. I'm just saying people do it. I know our fine governor here in the state doesn't think that South Carolina is ready for folks to gamble. I think he's misleading with that. I don't get on the political soapbox much, but one of the things that Governor McMaster is missing on is that as a South Carolinian, there are plenty of people that I'm going to tell you are going to bet. They're just betting now, and you're not getting a piece of it as the state. So why not cash in on that? But I live in the land of personal responsibility. You want to bet $25 on the preseason game between the Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys, you should be able to do that. And the state should be able to take some tax money out of it and, I don't know, fix roads, work on schools, make it where you can drive through parts of 5 Points without having potholes that are the size of craters that are within, a throwing stone from the campus of South Carolina. Yeah, we should be able to do that, but nah, we don't want that tax money. What ridiculousness that is. Side note, Governor McMaster does take money from casinos for his campaign. Look that up. Anyway, 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. About that game tonight, Randall says Steelers have a top 5 defense. No doubt that Big Ben will cost them this year. The old statue QB who can't move is gone unless your name is Tommy Brady. Yeah, I can buy that. I think the era of the NFL is guys that can move around are going to be important. I never thought Lamar Jackson would be a guy that would be able to do big things, but he's holding his own. By the way, there are trade talks underway for Deshaun Watson. One of those teams that is eyeing it closely, according to several reports, is the Carolina Panthers. You know, they just got Darnold from the Jets. Of the Philadelphia Eagles supposedly are in the mix to get Deshaun Watson. Apparently, if that's the case, then I assure you there's been attorneys or something somewhere that are saying, hey, a lot of these charges are probably going to go away. I don't know. Husker football asked me online, who plays better, Haskins or Rudolph? Well, Rudolph's been a starter before. So, I mean, I guess I would go with Rudolph. I don't know, to be completely honest with you. I don't know how many snaps he's going to get. He may not get as many snaps. You may see more snaps for the Steelers' third and fourth team quarterback tonight than you will see for the the other young man, Rudolph. So with that, though, they may be thinking Rudolph may end up being a guy that will have to play a good bit if Roethlisberger gets hurt again. And he says, yeah, Haskins got some time as a Redskins starter. Yeah. Remember, Haskins was one of the guys that, if I remember correctly, beat out Joe Burrow at Ohio State, which is the reason that Joe Burrow ended up going to LSU. So there's that. All right, taking your calls at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Got a quick break in a moment, but later on, we're going to talk about the NCAA and how they were probably listening to the show yesterday when I talked about something that they have issues with. We also will look at Bill Conley's predictions for the ACC Atlantic Division. Yeah, that's going to be it's interesting how he breaks that down. SCU Online asks, is there football on TV tonight? Yeah. You know what? We'll be watching the Hall of Fame game. Let's make sure we put that out there. We will be watching that, I assure you. It's football. We will be watching. So there's that. What was the other thing that I had that was stuck in my head? Oh, last night I stayed up late and watched Team USA basketball play Australia. And, you know, I'm a big international basketball fan. Australia's never won a medal in hoops. They played their butts off last night. You were sitting there and you almost wanted to root for the Aussies a little bit. Of course, Patty Mills and Inglis and a couple of other guys that I've never heard of, but they were up by 15 on the U.S. early before talent took over there. So, still, the U.S. placed for the gold on Friday night against France, the French team that beat them in group play. So maybe this game will be a little bit different. Who knows? The French, by the way, beat the U.S. the last 2 times they've played them in the World Championships. What was it, last season, 2 seasons ago, whatever it was, 2 years ago, and then in group play this year. They're not afraid of the U.S. So if you're into international hoops, that might be something to take a peek at. 10:30 tomorrow night as the gold medal matchup coming up on for the Olympics. One of the other interesting things too is you had to watch that game last night on Peacock. You had to be subscribed to Peacock to catch that game. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. All of this conference realignment, it's going to get to a point where a streaming service is going to get involved And that's going to be the only way that you can watch football. Yep, it's coming. Right on down the road here. All right, this is the rundown. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment on Fox Sports Radio 1400. It wasn't really like that last night there, Taco. I would like to see a field goal kicking contest. I think Jackpot would surprise you. He might hold his own. You're talking about Myles Garrett up there, Husker football. Yeah. Myles Garrett. It's telling me it's going to turn off the TV because it's been inactive, the Spectrum box, for 4 hours. So apparently when Teddy Hefner was in here this morning, he's watching the Olympics and he just left it on. Oh, no. Don't take away my women's table tennis, my ping pong tennis finals. Do they really? That's funny, Blind Squirrel. Hi, Beth. It's good to see you, ma'am. Oh, goodness. So everybody here is watching the Hall of Fame game, right? Well, tonight I would probably – I don't like either team, but I'll probably go with the Steelers. Just I do like Mike Tomlin, so I'd probably go with the Steelers. That would make more sense to me. Brandon with a good question. Any chance Miami upsets Alabama in week 1? No. Hell no. And did I say hell no enough? Hell no. Alabama's going to write a score down. I mean, they may kill De'Aaron King. Seriously. Well, welcome back to the rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. Yesterday on the show, in case you missed it, I talked about the NCAA and how you ever notice when they have these investigations that it takes forever? Yeah, we don't know we still don't know what's going to happen with Tennessee. We still don't know. Are they going to be hammered with sanctions? We don't know. We don't know. But the NCAA is changing the way it handles major infraction cases in an attempt to speed up what has been a protracted process so far, according to ESPN.com. On Wednesday, the Division I Board of Directors approved immediate changes that will allow the independent accountability resolution process complex case unit to accept the investigative work of the NCAA's enforcement staff unless the unit can demonstrate a compelling reason why additional investigation is required. There you go. Here's some of the examples. An infraction case involving former Memphis basketball star James Wiseman was the first case accepted by the IARP on March 4th. 5 other cases related to federal investigation into bribes and other corruption in college basketball involving NC State, Louisville, Kansas, LSU, and Arizona also were accepted. NC State is the only case related to federal investigation that has a hearing scheduled before the IRP, which will decide whether violations occurred and what penalties. I don't understand why things like this take so long. The NCAA comes to campus. They give them a week, give them 2 weeks. They make their decision on what happened, and that's it. You have a hearing where the university has the opportunity to speak for themselves. And then after that hearing, give them a day or two to come up with what they're going to do and then issue a statement. This is what we determined happened. This is the penalty for it. Start serving your stuff now. I don't want to hear about appeals because we've already given you the opportunity to speak here. We've given you the investigation stuff. Let it go. That's the way that it should be. Maybe that's the way that it will be eventually, but it's so weird because you can ask for you can have your sanctions levied upon you, and then all of a sudden you can appeal those sanctions with bowl bids and everything else. And then you have to wait on an appeal, and it takes forever. These are not the things that make sports great. It needs to be decisive. And if you're cheating and you're caught, just deal with it. Deal with it. It's insane. So I never thought I would say this on the air. Congratulations to the NCAA for finally, hopefully, doing something that might be correct. 803-978-1832. Let's move on to ACC Atlantic projections for the upcoming season. These are from Bill Conley. We did the SEC East yesterday. Today we'll do the Atlantic for the ACC. We'll also have the SEC West when he releases those. I think it's next week. We'll start with Syracuse. He's got them at 3.5 wins, 1.6 in the ACC. Likely wins are Albany. Relative toss-ups, Rutgers and Ohio. Let's slow down for a second here. How many people you think are going to be at that Rutgers-Syracuse game? I could draw more watching, coming out back and watching Lawton Swan and I shooting three-pointers on the iHeart basketball court that used to be back there. Serious. I don't know. Wow, that's just terrible. Likely losses: Wake, Boston College, Liberty, Pitt, Florida State, Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Clemson. I don't know. One conference win. Ridiculous, man. That's just terrible. So Syracuse, not a very good football program right now. It's just not quite there. All right, so let's move on to Florida State. Their projections, 5.4 wins total. So that puts them at 5. We round up and down. 3 wins in the ACC. Likely wins: UMass, Jacksonville State, and Syracuse. Relative top at Louisville, at Boston College, NC State. Likely losses: Notre Dame, Miami, at Florida, at North Carolina, at Clemson. So, yeah, there's that. FSU, by the way, they are, man, how the mighty have fallen there. Remember we were talking about Tennessee yesterday and how Tennessee used to be feared? Like you would see that T and you were thinking, man, somebody's going to get their butt beat on a little bit. So, yeah, now Florida State's kind of the same way. They are not a very, very good program right now. So we'll see how that works out. Nick has a question online. He says, do I think North Carolina is taking a similar path that Clemson was during their ascension to the top? No, I don't. I think that Clemson's run to the top started where they got some players that the first couple sets of Clemson teams were built around, skill position players, Taj Boyd, CJ Spiller, guys like that. The Clemson got great when they started doing better on the offensive and defensive line. North Carolina brought in Mack Brown to stabilize the program, and they've just responded very well. It's not really the same way that Clemson is. In fact, if you take Mack Brown away from that program, they're probably going to dip back into being a, 6-6 football team. Up next is Boston College. We had Jeff Hafley. We played his interview on the other day, and we had him from ACC Kickoff. They project them to win 6.6 wins, so 7 wins, 3 in the conference. Likely wins Colgate, UMass, Temple, Syracuse. Toss-up games, Wake Forest, Missouri, Florida State, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech. Likely losses at Louisville and at Clemson. It all comes down, in my opinion, to how well Phil Jurkovich is going to play. He has the time. He has the talent to carry that team. They almost beat Clemson in Clemson last season. So Boston College, a team that you should look out for in the Atlantic, in my opinion. Up next is NC State. Oh, one other note on the Eagles. They've won 6 to 7 games for 7 of the last 8 years. So they are, the consistent 7-5 football team. NC State, a very interesting team, I think, with the linebackers and stuff that they've got. I think they're going to be pretty good. They're projected to win 7 games, 3.6 in the conference. Furman, Louisiana Tech, South Florida, Syracuse are the likely wins. Toss-up games, Louisville, Wake, Boston College, Florida State, and Mississippi State. Winning that game on the road would be huge for them. It really would. Likely losses, North Carolina at Miami and Clemson. Dave Doran's building a solid program up there. He really is. He really, really is. We shall see how that works out for them up there. But 7 wins, that's a tough thing to do in the Atlantic with the schedule they've got, because they get North Carolina, Miami, and Clemson. Can't be slipping up against Louisville, and they play on the road at Mississippi State. Quick break. We'll do the rest of the Atlantic when we come back here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. All right, so who was it? Randall asked me about the 2019. What was the best team ever? I know that the 2019 LSU team is definitely in the top 3. The team that Clemson had that beat Alabama by 4 touchdowns has to be in the conversation as well. First team to ever go 15-0, beat the snot out of an Alabama team that had so many first-round picks, had a Heisman Trophy winner on that team. I mean, we could sit here and talk about how great that LSU team was, but in reality, they were not that Clemson team with Clelin Ferrell and Christian Wilkins and all those guys that were just outstanding. It would be I'd like to see those 2 teams square off, because I think that would be a heck of a matchup. In that game with Joe Burrow made some plays with his feet against Clemson that he would not have made if Christian Wilkins and Clelin Ferrell were there. Would not have made it. And I truly, truly, truly believe that. So I'm not saying Burrow wouldn't get his yards, but he wouldn't be the dual threat on the ground that he was throughout the season. So it's a tough thing to think about, but because I got respect for that LSU team, because they went through and they beat a lot of ranked teams that year, and they beat Clemson too, but they beat Clemson without that defensive line that Clemson had that was just outstanding. Just outstanding. So those 2 teams would be in the mix. I mean, they really, really would. I mean, you look at that Clemson team with, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne. And, this is a team that beat Alabama by 4 touchdowns with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. I mean, that should at least have you in the mix. The 95 Nebraska team was a very, very, very good team. That was the Tommy Frazier team, right? Yeah. They were a great team too, if I remember. That was the Tommy Frazier team, wasn't it? I believe so. I remember Tommy Frazier just running all over the place. I don't know how that would. I don't know how that would be. How that game would carry over. It's different eras. Clemson Dave was right about Hunter Renfro. People overlook Hunter Renfro all the time. He was just stupid good. Justin Ross was on that team as a freshman. People are going to learn who Justin Ross is this year. I assure you of that. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. We'll finish up these projections from Bill Connelly. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons, he's got them at 6 wins, 3.7 in the conference. Wins over Norfolk State, Old Dominion, Duke, Syracuse, toss-up games, Florida State. They're going to beat Florida State. Write that down. I think they beat Army, too. I think they beat Louisville. Boston College and Virginia. Likely losses at North Carolina and at Clemson. You know, Dave Clawson is one of those guys that is just an underrated coach. People don't seem to understand what he's recruiting against up there in at Wake Forest, being the smallest Power 5 school in the country, and they're always competitive. They're not going to beat you every time. They don't have the depth to hang with you, but they are a competitive football team. Very, very competitive football team. Louisville Cardinals, they've got them at 7 wins, 4.6 in the conference. I'm not buying that at all. Got them with wins over Eastern Kentucky, Syracuse, at Duke, with Boston College. His toss-up games are Virginia, Kentucky, at Wake, at Florida State, UCF, and at NC State. NC State is going to beat them. Kentucky is going to beat them. Their likely losses, Ole Miss and Clemson. I think Wake Forest beats Louisville too. So I think the line of folks that are shaking the hand of Coach Satterfield are going to be kind of going out the window. I don't think he's going to be coaching there very long after that. Projected win total for Clemson is 11 games, 7.3 in conference. No likely losses. Relative toss-up game is the Georgia game. And, of course, the rest of the games are likely wins. SC State, UConn, Syracuse, South Carolina, Boston College, Wake Forest, Florida State, Georgia Tech, at Louisville, at NC State, at Pitt. So the Clemson team is almost boring to do projections on. Other than the Georgia game, the way you look at Clemson is what team can stay within 17 points. That's how you have to look at it with the schedule that they've got. So, in my opinion, the teams that can stay within 17 points that are not named Georgia are NC State, Pitt, and Boston College. I mean, seriously, that's kind of the way that it is. That just shows you how big the gap is between Clemson and everybody else in the ACC. Now, if you put Clemson in the SEC, I think it's pretty much the same way. I think that they would win. They'd be double-digit favorites over just about everyone, with the exception of Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M would be in the mix too, and Georgia, obviously, and Florida. The rest of the teams in that conference, they would be double-digit favorites across the board. Just saying. The ACC doesn't have that team that's just right below. Like with Alabama, they're cut above everybody else, but then you have Georgia and Texas A&M and LSU that are right there trying to nip Alabama's heels. The ACC doesn't have that. It's supposed to be Miami and Florida State, and they just don't have it. They just don't have it. Clemson Dave says, and that's a bad thing. No, I mean, not really. You know, Clemson's built their program. And the reality is that if you're tired, if you're in the ACC and you're tired of Clemson beating you senseless, here's what you do. Work harder. Recruit more. Put the funding into your program where you have extra money to go recruit. Get the indoor practice facilities. Get the things that Clemson has and make yourself more competitive. That's what you do. If you don't put the money into it, if you don't put the time into it, if you don't do all of that, don't expect better results. That's basically what it boils down to. Clemson Dave's got another point there, recruitment. Clemson spends the most money in the ACC on recruitment. As far as, a lot of times it's a regional thing where, hey, we're going to recruit the region. Clemson recruits the entire country. It's just reality. Now, I'm not saying that you should recruit the entire country to start with. I'm saying you should, first of all, lock up the state that you're in and then go from there. Jeff online says Clemson is going to struggle with Syracuse this year and have a nail biter against Florida State. They're going to fall off a cliff this year. Only reason they are relevant is they play non-ranked foes. So they're going to beat Syracuse by 50. I don't know what you're watching here, buddy. You're not, if you would have said NC State, I might have bought it. You just said Pitt, might have bought that too. But Syracuse and Florida State, Blind Squirrel with a comment. Speaking of Georgia, Matt Stafford is the last Bulldog to beat Alabama. Can JT Daniels change that narrative this season? I'm not sold on JT Daniels. He played the easiest part of the Georgia schedule last year. And yeah, he won. He struggled against Cincinnati. His last little bit of time in the Pac-12, he wasn't exactly a world beater. I'm not buying the whole JT Daniels is the most awesome quarterback ever. Maybe it's just me. I think he has to go in there and prove his wit, basically. Because the 5 games that he won weren't against the tough part of the Georgia schedule. I'd have loved to have seen Georgia playing Alabama with him. I think they still would have lost. The Florida outcome would have probably been a shootout, but I think that Florida had, Trask was the better quarterback there. So, anyway, the folks online beating Jeff over the head talking about Syracuse beating Clemson. That's not happening, sir. It's not happening. The only game on the schedule that's going to be a challenge for Clemson on paper right now is the matchup with Georgia. The rest of the games, not so much. Clemson has to battle themselves and not turn over the ball, and they win by double digits over the rest of the schedule. Vol Steak Online finally agrees with me. You're right. JT Daniels is kind of overrated. It's an issue of we don't have a big enough sample size. Just saying. Think about that. All right. Tomorrow on the program, we will look at, we will have some more projections from Bill Conley. We're adding these two, as you can hear me stacking them up right now, to the bookcase of accountability. We'll see how that goes. And at the end of the season, I'm so looking forward. I want the football season to last forever. I get that. But the reality is that I love looking back at what people put out there and how close they get. We'll see how that works out towards the end of the season. Husker football asked my thoughts on Adrian Martinez. We'll have to see how he plays, man. See how that works out for Nebraska. All right. Thanks to the folks that tuned into the show. And thanks to you for listening. If you would like to download the podcast, it's great. It's wherever you can find your favorite podcast. Just search for The Rundown with Rob. Lawton Swan is next. He is the czar of Clemson Sports.
Stop looking at me, Swan.
Follow him on Twitter at Clemson Sports. I'm on Twitter at Rob Soundsgood. We'll see you tomorrow. You guys are awesome. Appreciate you guys. I don't have a whole thing with Uwe Ungalale, but what I do have is that Uwe Ungalale threw for over 300 yards in both games that he played. Just saying. Calm down with all that, brother. We'll see you guys later on.